Oh Lord, here we go again. I just dropped 2 tabs and I lost my friends. Oh Lord, here we go again. I just dropped 2 tabs and I lost my friends. I'm like, oh Lord, here we go.
Hey everybody, welcome back. It's Rip City Real Talk. Craig Moshkow and Anthony Blaylock here to recap the end of the regular season, which feels really weird to say out loud, but
it's over.
Yeah. So that's it. I guess we can pack it up and go home. We're done with the podcast. Just kidding. We have to do the postseason and all this other stuff too. But before we get into today's pod, I do want to say if you're on YouTube or if you're on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or any other podcast site, please like and subscribe. Subscribe on the YouTube channel because it actually helps us get a better figure. Leave us a comment and follow on Twitter. It's at Twitter at TalkRip. So if you could give us a follow and a like, that'd be amazing. A quick sub. It really helps the pod quite a bit. How you doing, man?
Doing good, bud. I'm doing good. Honestly, it was a good weekend. Went out fishing the Deschutes all weekend, so got to do a little bit of that. Had some success fly fishing. Came back and just looking forward to doing this podcast and talking about the end of the season, man. We have a couple games to go over. We have some cool stats and some interesting news this week, and we'll touch on all that and kind of let people know what our plan is for the rest of the season and everything else.
Yeah, we definitely want to keep it in line with what we normally do, which is recap the games. We are going to have kind of, I think, a special pod after the play-in where we talk about our matchups, playoff, top to bottom, all that stuff. But right now, we just want to go through the last week of the Blazers. So the last week of the season, we knew we had some games coming up that were going to be a little rough. We weren't sure how the lineups were going to shake out. So if you look at, we played the Rockets on last Monday. That was not exactly a playoff caliber team in that excursion there. So you want to talk about what you saw from the Rockets team?
Yeah, man, I saw a team that's young, hungry. They're getting near the end of the season. And when you get near the end of the season and you're a team like that, everybody's playing for contracts. These guys want to re-up. They want to get some of their contracts. They want to try to get back on maybe not the Rockets necessarily, but they at least want to try to earn a spot to get invited to a G League or a Summer League team or, earn some more 10 days next year and things like that. So I think they came out. They were pretty athletic. I give them that. They were young, lots of dunks. They shot really well. I was honestly kind of shocked. The 3-point percentage was good for them.
Yeah.
But I just don't know how serious we were taking the game. I think it's kind of one of those situations. I mean, yeah, we won 140 to 129, and we put up 140 points. And I think early, we set the franchise record for 50 points in the first quarter. And I think they kind of came out and just cruised to that big lead, and they kind of were just on fire, couldn't miss anything. And then I think it got to them a little bit. They kind of got a little comfy. I think they kind of took the foot off the pedal, for instance. And a team like Houston, who's really been putting up a lot of good games recently, they almost beat the Lakers for us. We'll talk about that. But they've actually been playing really good. They put up a good fight against Utah a couple nights before us. So, again, team that's just trying to play tough, play hard. Those young guys trying to earn those contracts. So it's always a little sketchy. But I think we needed a team like that to get ready before we had the back-to-back with the Jazz and the Suns. And so I'm happy we still came out and took care of business. We didn't play Melo that night, so that's one of the first things I noticed, and it definitely impacts our bench more significantly than I thought. We had Cantor go for 11, and that was basically it. It was pretty dry outside of that.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Anthony Simon scores 5 points. Derek Jones got 11 points in that game, which is, again, the Derek Jones conundrum is on. But, I mean, Cantor only played 17 minutes in that one, so you got to figure it really wasn't much of a bench at all. It was just the starters, and they played 35-plus minutes. And then at the end of the game, we had been up by so much that we were able to play the I'm going to call it the C squad, Blevins, LB, Giles, and Leaf. We were able to play them a little bit, 2 minutes each. So, with the Rockets, we got up early. We shot really well. The starting unit looked fantastic. I think that you can attribute that to the Rockets' subpar defense. I don't think they're a great defensive team. But, we played really tough. We came out in a game that we had to win, and we slapped them and punched them in the mouth from the opening gate. The 50 points was crazy. And then I think that sets the tone for the rest of the week because the 3-guard lineup was insanely effective this week. We haven't seen anything like it.
Yeah, they've been playing great. In that game especially, I mean, we had four Blazers get the 20 points, seven guys got in double-digit scoring, and it all starts with the three guards right now.
Mhm.
We've seen a couple times this year where they're putting up, 70 plus, almost 80 points a game between the three of them. When they're all on, when Powell's able to drive and they're starting to get open looks and they're making the right passes and all these different things, it finally seems like, and I know it's not a forward, and I still worry about it a little bit come playoff times, but at least for now, it's another viable scoring threat, and Powell's able to finally take a little bit of pressure off of Dame and CJ. We've seen instances where Dame has struggled a little bit against a double team still, but at least now you constantly feel like as long as Powell's out there, you have another guy that can easily go for 20, 25 a night now. Like, it's nothing. I mean, if he wants to get his, he can get his. I don't feel like Trent was that guy. I think Trent relied on the three-point ball, and when he was on, I mean, Gary Trent was amazing. It was fun to watch, and he'd go on heaters, but didn't give you what you're getting from Powell right now. And defensively, same thing. I mean, I liked Trent's defense as an on-ball defender, but he wasn't a great help defender, and he was still going to get people bigger guys. So Powell, with his wingspan, is able to do a little bit more of that. I see a little more hustle out of him as well when it comes to closing out on shooters and, getting some of the key steals that he's gotten recently and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, I didn't think it would work. I still don't think it's going to work in the playoffs. I mean, you get to a bigger team like the Clippers, if you get their wings, or LeBron and some of those other guys, it's going to still be a struggle to slow teams down. But, I mean, yeah, it's looked great the last week. It's good to see them gelling at the right time, getting ready for the playoffs.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, when you're talking about Powell, it was really hard to integrate him. I feel like we integrated him, and then Dame didn't look right for a while, and he wasn't playing very good, and everybody had high expectations for what Powell was going to bring. I feel like the last 2 weeks, over these last 12, 13 games, we really got to see this three-guard lineup thrive. And honestly, defensively, it hasn't been as bad as a lot of us thought it was going to be. That's always been my main concern. I knew we'd be able to score, but the last couple of weeks we've been able to turn up the defense. I think a lot of that is Nurkic, and I think a lot of that's Nurkic playing at a high level, and we'll talk a lot about that upcoming in the next two games. But, man, when you see the three-guard lineup, if it weren't for Nurk out there playing his butt off every night, I don't think we would have this strong of a performance, and I don't think that you would have somebody like Cantor anchoring this defense because you already have three undersized guards out there. But they've been able to hang with every team they've played, and every team they've played, we've played a lot of playoff contender level teams these last 2 weeks. Maybe they weren't at full strength, or maybe they were missing a guy or two, but we were able to punch the Jazz in the face in the middle of the week. And they're the number one team in the entire league. So there's no excuses for this team going into the playoffs. I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, you start with a warm-up against Houston, and that's a game that you expect would be a little bit further away than it was for an 11-point win. And I like that you brought up, we went right into the Jazz, number one team in the league. And the first bullet point that anybody's going to throw about this game is that they didn't have Conley and they didn't have Mitchell, and rightfully so. I mean, when we played Mitchell last time, I think he had 13 points in that third quarter, and he just drove the Jazz. He's going to continue to drive the Jazz offensively. I mean, we all know what Gobert can do defensively, and the other guys that they have there, and the shooters that they have. They're one of the top, if not the top, three-point shooting team in the league right now. Bogdanovich, Ingles, I mean, Clarkson. Anybody on that team can hit a three from anywhere, and outside of their bigs. And so they're always a tough team to defend anyway. Mm-hmm. But no Conley and no Mitchell really kind of allowed us to play the best possible offense we can play with our guards. And to that point, Dame and CJ both shot 50% from the field. That's incredible when you think about both your guards who take the most shots, both shooting 50% or better. That's crazy to me. And they combined for 56 points. And when you combine that kind of offense with the defense that you get from Nurk, that's potent, man. You talked about it, and Gobert got 50 points. I mean, that's all right. He got his, but realistically, Nurk gave him fits down there. They disrupted what the Jazz wanted to do over and over and over. I mean, I haven't seen Eagles get that pissed off in a while. It was really fun to watch how irritated he got.
Yeah,
Nurk slapping the ball off his leg, all sorts of different plays that were just huge and crucial in getting that win. But yeah, it's It's still tough when you win 105-98. You only win by 7 points, and they don't have their two best. Well, I'm gonna say their two best players, but they have one of their best players and a very good defensive-minded guard who's given Dame fits in the past as well. You're still a little concerned. You're not in the jump for joy, but you still had to split that series, the Jazz and the Suns, and it was good to get it against a team like the Jazz.
Yeah, and like you said, so Nurk goes at Gobert, and Gobert played his full complement of minutes in that game, and I thought Nurkic played really well. He had 11 and 15. He had 6 assists. He did exactly what you would hope, which is he went right at Gobert. He showed no fear in that game. And when we have that center, when we have that Nurkic, that version, the Blazers are a little more unlocked. We have more potency. We have more weapons that we can lean on. And then, like you said, CJ does his normal, 26 points. Melo gets 18 in 27 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It's Dame doesn't have to do as much. Now, Dame is fantastic, but earlier on in the season, I feel like he almost wore himself down having to do too much for this team. When CJ is taking the pressure off, when Nurkic is playing well and he's defending, it leaves Dame in a better place where we have an elevated ceiling, because now Dame doesn't have to give us 45 to 50 every night. He can give us a comfortable 30 to 32, and he knows exactly where to get his shots and where to hit his shots from the logo and do the things that needs to elevate the team. But man, I just felt a lot better about this week being in all these games. So the other question that I had for you, Jordan Clarkson still got 29 in that game. So defensively, we might have improved.
He played 30 minutes.
Yeah. Defensively, we might have improved, but do you still feel like the defense is lacking a little bit at times?
Tough to say. Honestly, this, again, even without Mitchell and Conley, who put up their fair share of threes and hit them efficiently, I've named off all the other guys that they have that can hit the three ball, and they can do it really well. We held them to 30%.
Yep.
So for a team that struggles with perimeter defense like we do, it's starting to get to the point now when you see Nurk playing bigger minutes. We talked about this a lot earlier in the year about how bad we were controlling the drives and then inside the paint. And guys like Rocco and Jones, they had to continuously sink in. They had to continuously go to try to help. And we still see it every once in a while, especially when Cantor's out there. But you're not seeing as much of that because of Nurk's ability to recover, to go out and help out and get back into the paint.
Right.
And it's starting to allow guys like Rocco and Powell to stay out in the perimeter a little bit more. I mean, yeah, you're going to give up wide open threes. It's going to happen. And we're not the best defense in the world, and offenses are going to beat good defenses almost every single time. And guys are going to get open, and they're going to get shots. Plays are going to break down. You're going to see transition, and it's going to happen. But for the most part, I thought they played really well on the perimeter, and that's one of the Jazz's strong suits. So that's the Nurk effect. That's the effect of him going down there and being able to play the kind of defense that you're talking about, disrupting plays. I mean, I mentioned earlier that he was slapping the ball out of Ingles' hands out of bounds, like those types of things. And then on the offensive side, when you talk about how Dame has been a little bit more efficient, he got that rest. That was big. He came back from that rest about the same time that Nurk was getting back into full strength. The team started to gel. And what I'm seeing a lot more of is just efficient-looking shots for Dame. He's not taking the ridiculously long threes because he kind of feels like he has to, because there's been all these one-point losses in close games, and he's been beat up, and he feels like he has to put the world on his shoulders. I'm seeing a lot more of him pass it off to Nurk, and then Nurk will find a guy coming around, cutting in, he'll pass it back to him. The little alley-oop, not really an alley-oop, but the little pass down to Dame coming around the corner for an easy layup. How many times have we seen Nurk and him connect on that right now? The timing that those guys have. So it's allowing, you're absolutely right, it's allowing Dame to have to kind of ease off a little bit when he feels he can. He doesn't feel like he gets to do everything himself now. And between Powell and Nurk coming into the offense, we've been the top offensive team in the league with this team. It's been playing big minutes together and finally gelling. So it's great to see. I still worry a little bit because Conley normally slows Dame down a little bit. There's nobody that was out there. I mean, they put O'Neal on him quite a bit, but O'Neal's not a world-class defender. I mean, he's a little bit bigger. It's a little harder to guard Dame. So you take this win with a grain of salt. Like you said, we knew that Clarkson was going to be the focal point of the offense. He was. He got 29 points. He's going to win the Sixth Man of the Year award. Yep. And you kind of let him do whatever he wanted. We still struggled to slow him down a little bit, and that does somewhat concern me when you talk about some of the types of guys that we're going to be playing come playoff time, some of the guards that are going to be in the West right now that you're going to have to deal with, or just wings in general. So,
Yeah, and I like what you said about the Nurk and Dame give and go plays because there's been a lot of that the last couple, I would say the last 2 weeks, and it's unlocked a little bit of some easier baskets for Dame. I feel like people think of Dame and CJ as this pair, like these two guys that play together all the time, but really Nurk and his passing help unlock Dame in the pick and roll a lot more than anything Dame and CJ do together. I mean, CJ basically mimics what Dame does in a pick and roll isolation. When you're talking about somebody who's really important to our offense, it's more important that Dame get open, easy looks from Nurkic in the pick and roll and get freed up through that. I feel like Cantor's a good pick and roll partner too, but he can't do nearly the things passing that Nurk can in the short roll. He can't kick
No,
out.
he's not nearly as good of a passer.
No.
Absolutely not.
And so that's something that's been really helping a lot the last couple weeks with the offense and helping Dame not to have to just blow by every single person he plays against. The other thing that I like what you said is Covington is not a wing shutdown defender. We're not going to put him on their best guard and just hope he just shuts them down like a Clarkson or Donovan Mitchell. He is an amazing help defender, and we'll talk about his defense a little bit. The only thing that makes me nervous is you probably put Powell on their best guard if it's a small, twitchy guard. And in certain matchups, come playoff time, that's going to present problems if we go against A-plus guards. I don't think that's going to happen, but still, that's something that makes me nervous.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something to keep an eye on. I mean, we saw a lot of what that could potentially be in the next game. So we're going to touch up here in the Jazz. I mean, it was a good win. It was closer than it probably should have been, but a stat that stood out to me is it was 5 turnovers to 12. They had 12 turnovers. We only had 5. So the ball security against at that point, the defense kind of goes out the window without a guy like Conley, and really Mitchell's not a terrible defender. So you're able to do a little bit more with ease. I talked about the efficiency of Dame and CJ with their 50% plus shooting. Yeah. But they holding on to the ball and the amount of turnovers that you got against them really turned that tide. And that's something when it comes to, you talk about being a playoff team and you get into the playoffs and how crucial every single play is in a close game. To have that kind of ball security against a notoriously great defensive team with guys like Gobert and Conley and whatnot. So that was a big stat to me. Everything was pretty even in that game. We played pretty good throughout, but the turnovers to me were the biggest thing. I mean, you get +7 on the turnover margin and you're getting points off of that. That was great to see. Yep. So that's one of the key things that I noticed, and I'm excited for the playoffs.
If we win the 3-point shooting percentage and turnovers, there's no reason the Blazers should lose that game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do agree. And then, that's going to help with the transition defense too, because missed threes and turnovers, that's one of the big reasons we've been such a bad team defensively. I mean, maybe not the turnovers, actually been relatively good on turnovers this year, but just the general types of plays that you can't have, the silly turnovers, yes. The taking bad threes because it's early in the shot clock and you just feel like you have a good look or whatever the case is. So it was nice to see all those things kind of flew in against the playoff caliber team and to come out with a close win, because this playoff series and the whole round, everything we do in the playoffs is going to be close. We're not going to be a team that's going to blow anybody out. I just don't see that. We're going to be fighting every time that we're in a close game and winning by close margins. So.
Yeah, and this was a tough week because you and I talked last week and we basically said we hope we can win all these games, but we'd really like to win 3 of the 4, right? And so we didn't know with the Jazz whether or not they were going to play all their players. We had no idea what the Suns were going to do because we didn't know if they'd be locked when we recorded last week. And it turns out that neither one of those teams were locked for the 1 or the 2. So the Jazz rested their guys because their guards aren't 100% healthy and they would take their chances. The Suns did not rest anybody, and they played us full strength. Now,
well, kind of. I mean, they didn't play Ayton, which, he's a pretty good big guy considering. We would have probably given Nurk a little bit more fits come off as far as his offensive abilities. But, yeah, I mean, I agree. They're for the most part, all their role players are out there. Both their guards are out there, including Devin Booker, who's previously been putting up 65% against the Blazers this year. So as far as the field goal percentage. But, yeah, I mean, Ayton's the one downside, but I don't count him as a high-caliber player. He's a good young center who's unlocked a little bit more potential Chris Paul league in that team. But, yeah, I mean, that was still a better test than I think the Jazz were.
Well, and you brought up a good point because without Ayton, they are severely undersized. I mean, they have Saric playing like these center minutes for them. They played Frank Kaminsky.
Yeah.
When was the last time you saw Frank Kaminsky play in an NBA game? 14 minutes. It was just, you're right. Ayton's definitely a big miss. But okay, if I told you that we would have won one of those games and almost won the second game against the number 1 and number 2 seed in the entire NBA, or in the West, I guess I should say, how would you have felt about that if I told you that before the Suns game was over?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you're thrilled about that, especially at this point in the year. I mean, you're already tired. It's a condensed schedule. You're fighting for your playoff aspirations. You're trying to clinch. So I mean, absolutely, you're happy. Even if you go 1-1, like, I mean, you're thrilled about that. You should be as a fan, especially the way that they lost. I mean, you realistically probably should have won that game, and it's a tough loss. We'll talk a little bit about it here in a second, but when you look at the final score, you lose by 1 point against Utah, and you beat the Jazz the night before by a solid 7 points. These are good things for two teams that, you know, very, very well may be the team that you're going to end up playing in the second round. So, yeah, I like it. I was happy about it, thrilled about it. We'll dive into the Suns game here a little bit more, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you were to tell me that, hey, we went 1-1 against the Utah and the Suns in a back-to-back, I'd have been extremely impressed, and I am extremely impressed.
So the reason I'm nervous about the Suns is the Bridges kid is a really good defender. Crowder's a long defender. They played Torrey Craig. They played Cam Payne. They have some long
Torrey Craig.
Yeah, long, tough defenders. And then, obviously, we all know Chris Paul is a complete nuisance on the defensive end. He's going to get up in Dame's pockets, and he's going to be all over CJ. They're more of a defensive team than I think people realize when you talk about the Suns and you hear Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton and Chris Paul. They have some really long, lengthy defenders, and Crowder's always a guy who defends well against us. So I felt good about playing them as tough as we did. Obviously, it came down to that ridiculous call. I don't understand why the refs would call that, and I don't understand how Stotts challenges that, and then the refs review it, and it's just it was pretty close if you ask me. Whatever, though, I guess.
So let's talk about that whole situation.
Okay.
So you go down right before that. You call the timeout. Melo goes to inbound the ball. All right. So I'm not saying that Melo shouldn't have inbounded the ball. All right. He's a great passer at this point in his career. He knows how to read where a guy's going to be. He's got a great arm on him to be able to put that ball into a good position without really messing it up as far as his accuracy goes and all that. But if it's me, Carmelo is one of the better free throw shooters that we have on the team as well. I mean, the guy's been hitting clutch free throws his entire career. So I almost wish you would have put Nurk inbounding the ball. Somebody else who can pass pretty good and open up your free throw shooters to be able to get the ball, because you know they're going to lock on Dame and you know they're going to lock on CJ. It's going to be really hard to get the ball to one of those two. So instead, what happens is it goes to Rocco. All right, so Covington gets this inbound. He gets fouled immediately. And then he goes down and he misses both free throws, which is ridiculous because he just made 2 free throws a couple possessions before that.
Yep.
And so it's a killer, man. It's one of those situations where instead of using the timeout on the challenge, which I know you had to do because you have to try to at least do something. You're not going to go down and get a good look regardless, most likely with 0.9 seconds. We do have Dame. We've been there, done that. But still, it's a low just probability on that particular play. So I almost wish they would have called the timeout right there to try to inbound the ball to set something else up to see how they were going to play the inbound pass and try to get that ball to either Dame or CJ or even reposition it to where Melo's back out there and just stands there and catches the ball. So, yeah, it just sucks, man. It's a terrible way to go. So you lose that. You miss the free throws. They go down, and then, you foul Booker with 0.9 left. He hits both of his free throws. You go down by 1, and that's that. So, tough loss. And I think when you watch the play, I mean, he had a little bit of contact, but in those types of situations, into the game like that, that was not a blatant hard foul. I mean, he went for a steal, he missed, and then Booker went up and shot, and he barely touches his forearm. He hit him. I'm not going to sit here and be the guy that's like, oh, I didn't touch him. But it's such a chintzy little love tap that, in a situation like that, the ref should not be calling that. I do not think that you call that to decide a game on a play that wasn't extremely blatant. It wasn't an extremely blatant foul. We've seen us win games like that. I mean, Dame's gotten tapped on his forearm and gotten free throws to win games as well. So I guess what goes around comes around, and that's just kind of what happens in this league. But yeah, tough way to go, because if they win that, I mean, they clinch the 5 seed and it's all over.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. The anti-Stotts crowd would say, why would you have Melo inbound that ball to Covington? Why wouldn't you use your timeout? It's all kind of hindsight, I guess. But if Booker goes down there, doesn't get that foul call, we win that game because we get the ball back with 1 second left and we run timeout. So, I mean, all these losses are close stuff. And yeah, in hindsight, you could say like, oh, we botched that. But if Rocco hits those 2 free throws, we win that game too. So it's all kind of just, I don't want to say bad luck, but it's just bad execution. We didn't pull off the execution that we needed to. I wouldn't say it's a coaching loss or that Stotts blew the game. I would say that the players had a chance. The refs definitely contributed a part of that, and Powell didn't execute. I mean, giving us the Covington and Powell made 2 poor plays or not great plays, and that's what happens.
Right. Agreed. And, there's some positive things to take away from this as well. This is a team that, as far as their wings and their guards go, we're at full strength. They played pretty good against us, but Damian Lillard, I mean, talk about a guy who wanted to lock up that playoff seed and get some rest against Denver. He played the entire second half, did not come out. Entire second half. In the end of the third quarter, there was a conversation between him and Stotts, and he basically told Stotts, leave me in. I'm not going to come out. I mean, obviously, Stotts the coach, and you can make that decision, and he has to listen. But the fact that he had enough trust in Dame to go out there and play another, 12 minutes, that's a lot of confidence in your guy on a second night of a back-to-back. Like, if you wear him down to the point where, let's say you go into overtime or whatever the case is, you're risking that Denver game. I mean, you're risking him. You get 2 days of rest, but you're risking him not being 100% going into the game that you need to clinch playoffs and potentially have to get into the play-in bubble. So interesting to me that was a decision that was made, but hats off. I mean, that's 2 guys that trust each other, and that's 2 guys that knew, like, I can go out here and do this. Don't worry about me. And all Damian Lillard did with that is miss 7 shots. That was it. He went, I think, 16 of 23 he shot. He had 41 points. He basically scored every point in the freaking fourth quarter. It was
crazy.
One of the best showings I've seen Damian Lillard all year. It was probably one of my favorite Damian Lillard games I've seen him play in a regular season in a few years. To just take over like that against the number 1 seed or number 2 seed and go out there and essentially have a chance to will your team to a victory against Chris Paul after Chris Paul was just doing whatever he wanted to us. And, on a night where Booker was struggling a little bit, there's a lot of talk about Booker and Dame being those 2 guys. Last year in the bubble, it was all about those 2. So this is a really good head-to-head matchup from a guard perspective, and Lillard looked amazing. And that's one of those things that when you talk about some of the teams we're going to play against and how teams are going to trap Dame, etc., this is the kind of stuff that you need to see out of him consistently in these close games. And he has to look this efficient, and it was beautiful, man. It was amazing basketball to watch.
It was, yeah. And, I mean, Covington gave you 16 points in 37 minutes, and he played great defense all night.
Yeah.
And I just hats off to him. CJ gave you exactly what you'd want, 27 points in 39 minutes and 6 assists. So he did some nice facilitating in that game. I don't really have any complaints about that game. I'll take a coin flip against the second best team in the West every single time. If you tell me that Covington hits those free throws or the refs swallow their whistle on that foul call, we win that game and we walk out of there and we have a ridiculously tough stretch to end the season and we run the table on it. So it is what it is. And as a fan, you cannot sit here and complain about a really close loss like that where obviously mistakes were made, but the guys played their butt off, and Dame is just 41 points to drop that against that good of a defense. And they are a good defense too. I mean, they slapped Torrey Craig on him. They could switch off to Bridges. They could put Crowder on him at any point. And all 3 of those guys are bigger, longer, tougher. They're like anything compared to Dame. And he burned them all night long. It was kind of
over and over.
Just ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be fun. I personally, I don't think the Suns even make it out of the first round at this point, having the bad luck of most likely drawing the Lakers. So, yeah, they won the battle, but the overall war ideally could go to Portland.
Sure.
So good for them. Chris Paul shot 11 of 14. It was just getting to watch what Chris Paul did in that fourth quarter versus Damian Lillard. That is 2 of the premier point guards in this league.
Yeah.
And it's just good basketball, man. It was just, you can be upset that we lost a close game like that, the second night of a back-to-back, but That was the closest thing to a playoff game that I think we've had. The rotations were small. Simons, Carmelo, Cantor, done deal. That was it. That was our bench. So the guys playing big minutes like that, you're starting to see kind of where Stotts is going to go in these close games. The matchups dictated a little bit of that, sure. But, I mean, this is it. This is what you're going to see night in, night out in the playoffs. You're going to see us run these types of minutes. You're going to see Dame probably take over late in games. So that was the closest thing we've seen to a playoff game so far, and I like what I saw. I mean, like you said, that could have gone either way. If you run an entire series against a good team like that and you're playing at that high of a level with that kind of energy, good for you. You're going to have a lot of close games, and you're going to have a lot of chances to win a couple series and hopefully make a good run, entertain the fans. I do have a stat that stood out to me that I think was kind of a big deal. They had 10 offensive rebounds. That's killer, man. Especially when you have a guy like Nurk and Cantor out there. For them to get 10 offensive rebounds with no Ayton, when their starting center is Dario Saric. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Saric, there you go. I don't know. The whole C making a sound bugs me, but no disrespect to Nurkic. Anyway, so, Crowder and Saric are their two bigs, and they're out rebounding you that bad. That's something you're going to keep an eye on. That's something I don't like seeing at all. I feel like Cantor and Nurk should be winning the rebound battle, especially the offensive rebound battle, every single night against a team like that doesn't have a starting caliber center. So, a little disappointing, but yeah, either way, I felt good about the game in general. I think you felt good about the Dame.
I did.
Or the Dame. I felt good about the Dame, too.
I felt good about
the game. So, all good things, man.
Yeah. And so that game ends. And, I mean, honestly, we're feeling pretty good. We're 2-1 on the week. The one loss is to the Suns. It's a really close game. And then we know we have Denver coming up on Sunday at the end of the week. And we know that the schedule needs to shake out. So all the seeds 1 through 9 were all up for grabs all week long. And all week long, Blazers Twitter was blowing up. And Blazers Edge is blowing up, and it's talking about what matchups need to happen and what games need to, Dallas needs to win and that Lakers need to lose. I didn't pay attention to any of that. I just didn't pay attention till Sunday until we needed to know what needed to happen because I knew we were going to play Denver, and I knew that it was either we were going to need to win to take the 6, or if we lose, we probably are going to fall into the play-in. I knew that going all week long, so I wasn't too worried about it. But it's interesting to see how it all shook out. We were at the end of the day, all the West teams are playing each other. Dallas needs to win in order to get ahead of us. And then the Lakers need to win what did the Lakers need to do? They weren't going to, if we win, the Lakers were the 7th seed no matter what, because it was a 3-way tie between us and the Mavericks and Lakers. So, and the Mavericks got the 5th seed because of the fact that they had their division win versus us and the Lakers who didn't. So, so the Lakers didn't really matter. They didn't play like it mattered once they saw how bad we beat down Denver. I mean, you could kind of see the rest of some guys. It was the Pelicans. It was a pretty easy game for them anyway. But yeah, if we lose and they win, they jump us and they take the 6th seed. So, I think both games starting at 6 o'clock was in sneaky play by the NBA because it didn't allow either team to really know what was going on at the time, except for some potential scoreboard watching while you're out there playing. So I think that's why I love the play.
Yeah, I think the Lakers just kind of saw that and
I thought it was one of the coolest ending days to a season ever because every game felt like it mattered. And while we're playing our game, we're score watching the other 2 games to see how Dallas and the Lakers are doing. And we have to watch what the Clippers are doing because if the Clippers win their game, then we would get them in round 1. It was just nuts.
I mean, how crazy is that they go out and lose to the Thunder like that? Yeah, I think I said it last week, or I was talking to you about it at least, that it was going to be really interesting drawing Denver because you're going to end with them and then potentially turn around and have to play a series against them. And so you're kind of, I don't want to say you're concerned about it, but you think about it like this is a freebie for essentially Denver getting to do somewhat of a scouting report, they don't have to run their normal sets. They can kind of get a game to see how we're going to play because we're fighting for our playoff lives. And they could take that back and get ready for a series against us where they didn't do the things they're probably going to do in a normal playoff series against us. And so we, on the other hand, didn't really get a good primer against them, except for kind of looking at how they're going to do certain things and how guys are shooting, health, things like that.
Yep.
And that's exactly how it felt when they went out there. I mean, we just obliterated them. We blew them out from the get-go. First half, you get up by 26 points, and that was our largest lead. They never, ever got within anything until the very end, until garbage time minutes. They ended up being 132 to 116. But
Yeah.
I mean, that was just an ultimate butt kicking, and it was just great to see because this is a team that's had your number. They started at full strength. I mean, the guys only played, I think 2 of them played over 20 minutes, and 14 players played for them. I mean, they went deep to the bench even before garbage time minutes, and they didn't play anybody. Jokic played 21 minutes, and that was their only starter over 20 minutes. So they already knew like it was done after probably halftime. They weren't going to waste the guys. They're going to go get some rest, get ready for the playoffs. Where we kind of still, held the throttle down a little bit until the end, and then finally got our guys in there. But I loved it. I mean, it was good to see us go out there and take care of 3 playoff teams, the top 3 teams in the West, and go 2-1 against them, and all were definitely had the wins. We played most of them at full strength for the most part. So,
yeah, and you're right. I mean, so they really. I think part of the reason too is if it was a close game, maybe they would have played their guys a little more. But we came out and just blitzed them from the start, man. We were on fire offensively, and we were ripping them up in a game we absolutely had to win. The guys just look locked in. They've looked locked in for 14 straight games now. It's been kind of ridiculous, to be honest with you. But when you talk about winning that game, you knew we controlled our fate. So the guys came out, and thank goodness they stepped on them early because I did not want to be in a nervous position in the fourth.
You want to be in a close game.
Line. Yeah, could you imagine? That'd be too much. But I feel really good. I think we talked about the biggest game of the year was that Laker game last Friday. I think that Laker game where you come out and you beat them, and that gives you the tiebreaker over Anthony Davis and LeBron. To me, that was the biggest game of the year, and then we did just enough to stay in that position. It's too bad we didn't get that Phoenix game, but it really doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things because if you ask for the ideal matchup for the Blazers in round 1 of all those top 6 teams, it's probably going to be Denver without Jamal Murray. Am I right?
I agree. I mean, yeah, they're going to have the most likely MVP candidate on their team, but Dame was an MVP candidate for most of the year too. So their guards aren't going to be able to stop our guards, and Big's going to be an interesting battle because if Nurk gets into foul trouble, you're screwed. But like I said, I don't want to touch too much into that right now. We'll get into our playoff primer. We'll talk about the matchups. We'll break that down for everybody and go into detail next week. Get ready before the first game. We'll get it out there. But yeah, I mean, it's still. I think they saw the Clippers game and they probably said, "Screw it, we're done. We're already locked into the 3rd seed." And they took some guys out, and I kind of think that same with us. We took the foot off the gas a little bit there in the second half and just kind of coasted to an easy win. And it should have been an easy win when they don't have any other starters play over 20 minutes, except Jokic with his 21. So,
yep. I was kind of
and that's it, man.
I was kind of nervous because I thought we might draw the Clippers after that game. But then the other thing that I was nervous about is, did you notice Michael Porter Jr. kind of strokes it like Kevin Durant? Like he's kind of got a ridiculous jumper, and I thought he might get hot for a little bit. That dude looks really talented to me, and I kind of wish that he wasn't on their team right now because with him and Jokic, it's kind of a nasty big combo there.
Yeah, one of the steals of the draft a couple of years ago. I mean, he fell because of the back injury, and people were just not sure what they were going to get out of him. I think so to fall into the teens like that was great for Denver because they definitely didn't have the pick that they should have deserved to get him. I mean, it was a late pick, middle round pick. So, but yeah, I mean, Porter looks great. Jokic looks great. They have good veterans and all this stuff. And as we get into the next week, we'll talk more about that. But I don't know if I was nervous necessarily the entire game. I felt like I was maybe at the start because I didn't know how they were going to come out, knowing that they had to kind of deal with the Clippers game. And, you don't want to see them. They didn't want to fall to 4. They don't want to deal with that nonsense. So you're worried they were going to come out a little bit. And I didn't want to be in that playoff tournament, the play-in tournament. So that worries me. But once we came out, we just looked like a team that was pissed off about Phoenix. We looked locked into this one. They knew that they had to come out and get that win. It was a home game, and you did. I don't have bad things. I don't have much to say about this game in general. Honestly, I looked at some of the stats. I mean, what really stood out to me, and really nothing stood out. It was a relatively even game, statistically speaking, except for the minutes. They just didn't play their guys, and they didn't have to, and it was great for us. It was a nice, easy coast to end the year. Honestly, I like that because I didn't want to have to play a close game in the turnaround and go into playoffs that you're being a little bit tired and banged up or whatever the case is. So getting a blowout win to end your season and kind of get some extra rest. Yeah. And that's the nice thing about this playoff bubble, right? Is now you get almost an entire week of rest, over a week of rest potentially. So
yeah, I think that's huge.
That was just great. We need it for sure.
We do. And so, okay, so let's talk about the season as a whole. So now the season is over. The regular season's over, and we can talk about. So the Blazers went 42-30 in 72 games. The over/under for ESPN was 41.5, so we beat that by one game. And
same with Vegas, yeah.
Yep. And so if you want to sit here and say that CJ missed 30 games, Nurkic missed 32 games, you're looking at a guy like Dame who has to carry the load. He was an MVP for 75% of the year. 42-30 in the 6th seed and avoiding the play-in is a phenomenal year. It's fantastic with the injuries we had to deal with. Now, I understand that Stotts is going to be on the hot seat in the playoffs, and if we don't advance, then it's going to be an issue. But when you look at the year, it's a total success. Damian Lillard wins the Western Conference Player of the Week last week, and he just looked fantastic the last 2 weeks. Stotts won the Western Coach of the Month for April, which was crazy. Right? It was April, right?
Yeah, was it? No, I think it was May.
Okay,
I don't remember.
For the 16 days of
May. It was April.
Coach.
No, it was April. They don't announce May until the season's. It was April.
Yeah. So Stotts wins a Coach of the Month thing along with Thibodeau, which was fantastic to see, right? And we're going to talk about this upcoming week about the matchups and the playoff matchups, but the regular season as a whole was a success. We are going into the playoffs, matchup irregardless. We're going in healthy. We have all of our starters, and we can use anyone at our disposal. That's kind of interesting. We are one of the few healthy teams right now in the West. And so if you want to talk about walking into the playoffs, we're feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, and, again, the competition that we played recently wasn't, like you put it, healthy. So you take some of these wins with a grain of salt, but either way, you talk about, like you said, you talk about the games that Nurk and CJ missed. You talk about having to figure out your lineups and your rotations, having to integrate Cantor back into the bench, get Simon more minutes. You had to deal with a trade where you lost 2 of your bench players to bring in another starter after already dealing with 2 new starters and trying to fit them in. The rise and fall of Derek Jones and his relationship with the coaching staff and the team and his role now and all these things you went through. And then you talk about, last year was a little different because most of the beginning of the year you had fans. There was no COVID. And then COVID hits, you miss a couple of months before they finally figure out the whole bubble thing in Orlando, and you come back, and that's a whole weird situation on its own. And this year, at least you get to play at home, but it's still, a majority of the year you have no fans. We were the last team to have fans in the arena.
Yeah.
The condensed scheduling, you have to playing teams 2-3 nights in a row. It's just a weird year, and to be able to come out in a loaded West once again. I don't think you look at any team over in the East right now and you're like, they scare me. Philly looks, sure, they're kind of good. Brooklyn obviously, but outside of that, again, it's all the West right now. And to come out and be 6th in the West in the regular season with the COVID situation going on, all the new players that we got, 2 injuries to 2 of your top 3 players. Yeah, man, you're feeling pretty good about the year. And not just that, but all sorts of fun little franchise records got broken. Cantor broke the single game rebounding record. We broke the 3 points in a game record. We just hit the most points in the first quarter.
Anthony Simon.
You think about Robert Covington was the second player in Blazers history to lead the team in steals and blocks. It was Mo Harkless did it in 2016-17. So he comes out and was statistically, at least, everything you wanted from the defensive wing that you signed him for or traded for him for. So, it was just a cool season to see a lot of that happen. It would have been nice to be able to go to games and cheer this on with arguably one of the more talented teams that we've had around Dame and CJ and his core and all that stuff. But coaching aside, historically bad defense aside, a lot of positives came out of the regular season. There's a lot of things that are just cool to see if you're a fan because, you might look back on this and be like, another crappy season. Maybe we get knocked out of the playoffs early. They got knocked out of the playoffs early. But you saw so many cool franchise firsts and all the adversity the team went through to be where they're at this year. And I think that's a huge hats off to not only the coaching staff, but the players resolve. They lose 5 straight. You come back out and go on this ridiculously good run. And, I have my issues with the GM. I have my issues with Olshey. I have my issues with Stotts. I'm going to have those same issues. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have my issues with players. But it was still an overall just solid season and lots of cool things to cheer for. It was a great season to watch as a fan.
Yeah, they gave us everything we asked for in a COVID year where everything was sorted down. They went out there and gave us every energy every night. And the other thing is, so with with this team specifically in the preseason, we thought the defense was going to be better. But halfway through the year, they realized that that wasn't really a thing. And so they made that Gary Trent move to get Norman Powell, and they shifted the culture a little bit into more of an offensive output.
Yeah.
You know, I applaud O'Shea for making a big move like that. I applaud him for swapping out a starter or at least a sixth man for a starter. And no matter what happens, we gave it everything we had. Dame was healthy almost all year. CJ and Nurk battled back from some really tough injuries. And I think you're finally seeing Nurk play like Nurk
This
played.
is the old Nurk.
Yeah, pre-2018 leg injury and all that stuff. So it's been really fun to see us actually have our franchise center back in full beast mode again. Going into the playoffs, I know that everybody's going to hang this whole season on the postseason performance, but to me, the job that this team did to come out there and fight with no fans for 95% of the games that we played this year was stellar, and I applaud them, and it's been really fun doing it with you, man, and getting to recap every game with you this year. We're going to do the playoff stuff, and we're going to really come back next year, really retooled. And we hope everybody who follows us right now comes back, and we're going to pick up a lot more next year because we're going to put a lot of energy into this pod for the fans, definitely.
Yeah, for sure. And we have a little bit more to cover before we get into all that sappy stuff there, bud, but appreciate it. So let's talk about the one bit of news. Not much going on this week. I mean, outside of the playoff clinching, which is the 8th consecutive season, the longest active streak in the NBA. No big deal.
Yeah.
But Stotts gets Coach of the Year. You touched on this really quick. You mentioned it. It came up. So Stotts gets Coach of the Year, Coach of the Month, for April, going 7-2. So how do you feel about that, man? Do you think that changes anything? I mean, I know earlier in the year we had the whole Stotts on the hot seat thing. We were also in the middle of a 5-game losing streak, and then we immediately turned it around. And now he's getting Coach of the Month, and now it's all of a sudden like that narrative has changed significantly. The players look like they've been lost. You called me out on that. I said it earlier in the year. I talked about it looked like Stotts had lost the locker room. Guys weren't having fun. I didn't hear Dame coming out sticking up for Stotts and missing the criticism. And now I'm coming out and I'm seeing Dame doing the normal Dame stuff. Hey, I want to win a championship in Portland. That came out this week. He had one of his interviews. He wants to do it here again. You're seeing that old the old stuff that we've been seeing this team historically with the culture just emerging like flowers in spring. I mean, it's crazy, and you got to think that Stotts is a part of that. I don't know how much the coaching really matters going in 7-2 because, again, we talked about the amount of teams that didn't have their full arsenal. Memphis and San Antonio were two great wins, especially coming off that 5-game losing streak, and they're fully healthy and playoff teams that are at least in the chance to make the playoffs. So you beat them, and other than that, there wasn't too much to be overly hyped for as far as the health of the guys who played. So I don't put too much stock into the Coach of the Month thing, but you think that changed the narrative a bit? You think he's still in the hot seat come playoffs, or do you think things have changed a little bit?
So I do still think he's on the hot seat, and I'll say why in a minute. But it proves one thing: he did not lose the locker room. There was some reporting coming out, the Chris Haynes thing, Kevin O'Connor, a bunch of people came out and said, like, basically, has Stotts lost the locker room here, and is Dame getting fed up? Is Dame tired of not having enough help? Is this like a blow it up situation? And it was one of those pivotal moments where I think they called it seemed like to me they called a players only meeting, and Dame basically said, we need to take some pride and finish this year off the way we're capable of finishing the year. Sure. Stotts didn't lose the locker room. I just think that the guys were a little lethargic at times, and I do think a new voice may help with that. But at the end of the day, 8 years in a row, Dame and Stotts have got this team into the playoffs. And 8 years in a row, we've never been the laughing stock of the league. We've never been the lottery team. We've never been anything like that. So I would equate it to the Dwayne Casey situation. Dwayne Casey won Coach of the Year that year that he was fired in Toronto, and it was unfortunate. Yeah. So the accolade is great for Stotts, and it's wonderful that he got it. And I think he deserved it for getting this team back on track. But will that prevent him from getting fired? No, it's still going to be a deep run in the playoffs, and it's still going to be, in my opinion, showing that you can make adjustments in a playoff series, showing that you can adjust your lineups, showing that you can win the chess match against a coach like Mike Malone, who's really highly regarded in NBA circles. I mean, Mike Malone could have been Coach of the Year this year if it weren't for the Jamal Murray injury. That guy's a phenomenal coach. So I don't think it's going to prevent him from getting fired, but it's a great question. I think really simply him and O'Shea are going to have some really brutal conversations, and then how this team exits the playoffs is going to be what determines his future.
Yeah. No, I can't argue that. I think
It's tough.
that's a fair assessment. I mean, I love the Casey pool from Toronto because I think that's a really good way of putting that. I mean, you
So
win Coach of the Year
awkward.
and you get axed. Like, what?
They fired him and then he got Coach of the Year. It was so awkward, dude.
Yeah. And then they go and win a championship. No big deal. So, yeah, because, personnel is not coaching anyway. But so I would think that's fair. I think it's going to be not only necessarily how you perform as far as the record goes and what round you go out, but how you perform during the series itself. Like if you get swept and you getting blown out again, and it doesn't look like there's any adjustments, as you put it, in heart, that's one thing. If you're coming out and playing super competitive, if you get to the second round and you continue to play competitive, I think there's things to think about. We'll talk more about that when we get to that point. I'm not saying that that's a deal breaker for Stotts or not, but I think it makes that conversation a bit more interesting when you feel like what this team might be able to do with fans in a regular season and the defensive effort, the healthy Nurk all year, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things we're going to break down once the season officially wraps up. We'll talk about players coming back and all that good stuff. But yeah, I think that's a fair point when it comes to the Stotts thing, man, for sure.
I mean, he avoided the play-in. I don't know what else fans really would want him to do right now. He made the playoffs. We get a week to rest. We're a healthy team. I understand. Okay, so the big knock is defense and adjustments, right? Defensively, we were terrible again this year. We've been really good the last 14 games. We've been top 15.
Been good the last couple of games since Nurk has been back to playing Nurk.
Yeah, surprising, right? But I don't know. I mean, we'll see. We'll let it all play out. We're all fans, right? We don't really get a say in any of this anyway. It has to be determined by ownership and by the front office that
Right.
they want to move on from him. So I just don't see. I agree with you. I think it's all personnel, and I don't see how you can sit here and blame Stotts for every single thing. But we'll get into it after the playoffs, and we'll figure out what the future holds for him.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that brings me to my next segment, my favorite segment, and the segment that made us have to play much harder than we needed to have to play. I'm a little disappointed that this next person on the Blazing New Trails, ex-player of the week, a.k.a. the Traitor, that's what I'm going to call him, a.k.a. everybody's favorite superhero, Iron Man, a.k.a. Wesley Matthews. So Wesley Matthews is my Blazing New Trails player of the week. Y'all might remember Wes. He had the cool Iron Man song. He was Aussie. He came out, just never missed a game until he did. Until he tore his Achilles. Until we broke the team up right after that. Yeah. Until everything went almost disastrous. But it didn't. So Wesley goes and he leaves us. He signs a max deal, $20 million a year for Dallas. Doesn't work out. Okay. And then he starts jumping around, hopping, skipping all over the league. Goes to Milwaukee. They try to get a 3-and-D guy, trying to see what they get out of him. That doesn't work out. Milwaukee sucks last year. Nobody knows why. Greek's over here pretending to break his ankle. So Wesley leaves, and then he goes to the Lakers. First off, I don't feel like that's allowed. Like there should be something in your contract that's like, yeah, man, you're like down the road. You have like 10 years. You can't join the Lakers. Yeah, that should be in every single contract that a Blazer signs. But whatever, it's not, and he did. So he's over there. He's playing in L.A. Minimal role most of the season. He been a bench guy for them. Still getting up decent 3-and-D minutes. He's still been part of that defense that's been really good for the Lakers and helping them keep afloat. So the reason I bring him up this week, and the reason Wesley Matthews is on my crap list right now, is a family-friendly podcast. So he goes with 0.9 seconds left against the Houston Rockets in a close game. No LeBron. All right, and LeBron's not there. I don't even think Davis played that game, or if he did, he was banged up. I don't really remember. I was scoreboard watching more than I was actually paying attention to the actual game. But the point is, I do know that Wesley Matthews got a steal, 0.9 to go. He gets fouled. They get the ball back, and then Thornton goes down and hits a shot to win the game. Well, I didn't win the game. They were up by 1, but still, they go down and win the game. Wesley Matthews almost single-handedly cost the Blazers the play-in because of that steal, they won the game, and then we had to go out and play as hard as we did against Phoenix. And if everything would have rolled over, and who knows, if we lose to Denver or we lose to the Jazz in that situation, because this game was before we played. It was a Wednesday night, so this is when we played the Jazz. Then we lose to the Jazz and we lose to the Suns. We're in the bubble right now. We're in the play-in tournament, and that we avoided it, thank goodness. But I'm a little disappointed with Wesley Matthews on that one, man. I never bought his jersey. I'm glad I didn't, because I would have probably burnt it. I wouldn't have. That's not right to say. But yeah, so he goes out against that steal. So hats off to him. He's going to be on the Lakers team. We talked last week about Patty Mills being one of the only Blazers to come through Portland in this brief time and go somewhere else and get a championship. Well, the Lakers at full strength are probably going to have just as good a shot as anybody right now, outside of maybe Brooklyn, to go and win the championship again. People are sleeping on them. I mean, poor Phoenix. That's a shoot draw, family-friendly podcast. So that's man. So that's interesting. So I'm kind of rooting for him secretly. People don't want to admit it, but I'm rooting for Wes. I mean, he had just tough luck there, man. It sucks with the injury that he got and how he kind of broke that team up right after that. So if he goes out and if the Lakers do happen to win another championship and Wes gets a ring for it, I'm going to be slightly less upset.
Yeah, he's a fantastic Blazer. Gave us a lot of great years in those LaMarcus Aldridge years. And then, when he blew that Achilles out, it's something that we don't talk about a lot, but we could have allocated a max contract to him, and we didn't, thank goodness, because Wes really never was the same after that injury. It's too bad. He was a lockdown wing defender and a fantastic three-point shooter before that injury. I mean, he's still solid now as a role player. He gets some minutes for them, but he's been bouncing around the league because he's like a 7th, 8th man in your rotation. He's really kind of deep.
He came up with he had the 3 goggles. He had the archery thing he was doing for a bit. I mean, he had it all. He was one of my favorite Blazers to watch forever because he wasn't splashy. And you think if he doesn't get hurt, we may never see CJ. CJ was that was his rookie year.
That's a great point.
And CJ came in and looked good in the playoffs. That Memphis series kind of came out and balled out a little bit, and they felt comfortable enough to give the reins over to CJ. And who knows? Healthy Wesley Matthews definitely gets that contract. I think things change. That team, we don't need to go down that road, but I think that he ends up being that guy, and CJ's the next Anthony Simons getting limited minutes in the Stotts rotation, and who knows what could have happened. So an interesting little thing there. When you go back and think about that,
It is. It's really interesting. And Wesley was one of my favorite Blazers during that era. I think he really was identity of the Blazers. He was just really tough-nosed. He was durable. He never missed games. It was crazy. I agree. If the Lakers are going to win the title, I hope Wesley gets a ring. If Wesley isn't on that team, I hate them even more because they have no one likable on that team. I hate them.
You don't like Kyle Kuzma?
Well, yeah, I hate Kuzma. I hate Caruso. I cannot stand AD anymore. Ever since he moved to LA, it's just been annoying.
I hear you. So yeah, man, that's all I got for this week. I don't have much else. I mean, I think we kind of touched on everything that we wanted to touch on. I know people are all in playoff mode right now and breaking it down and doing this thing, and we'll do that. We'll talk about it next week. I mean, those who listen to us, we want to give you the breakdown. We want to spend some time really analyzing the matchup now that we know what it is, and really get you guys a pretty good prepper for the first round series against Denver. So we'll do that. If you guys didn't subscribe or follow or download or like or whatever you do on the social medias and the podcast sites these days, do that now. It'd be great if you made it to the end of this video. We appreciate you. We're going to continue to do some stuff, I think, after playoffs. So we'll continue to do our weekly thing. Depending on how long playoffs go, we'll continue to recap the games and talk about any news and media highlights and all that fun stuff. We'll do that. And then once playoffs get over, I think we're going to start doing some different stuff for you guys. We'll probably do a recap during things like free agency. And then we'll probably start to do more 20-minute episodes, a little smaller, shorter podcasts and videos during major news in the off season. So, when we sign a guy or trade a guy or whatever that kind of stuff is, we'll get on and break that down, that specific thing, because there just won't be enough content to really do a full 45 minutes to an hour, I think, during most of the year outside of maybe the free agency period. So, we'll come back. We'll talk to you guys then. I think I'm done, man, unless you got anything else you want to talk about.
That's it. Yeah, we're going to try to get it out by Saturday of this upcoming week because we know that the series starts. We'll know all the play-in stuff by then, so we'll know all the matchups, so we can do a quick pick-em, too, of each series. But we're going to come back with a playoff primer later this week, so stay tuned, follow along, and other than that, go Blazers.
Go Blazers. Rip City out.
We out.